Apartheid in Afghanistan. This is just following International Women's Day, so it is a reminder of how much more we have to do. And I share with you all here by your being in a seat that you're committed to that work. So I'm Laurel Fletcher. I am co-director of the Metra Institute for Global Challenges in the Law, and I also am the director of the Global Rights Innovation Lab Clinic, and so sponsoring the talk today. I also wanted to recognize our amazing student organizations as co-sponsors, because I think it's more likely that you're here because of that affiliation, and I think it just really speaks to the breadth and depth of our law school community. So the Berkeley Journal of Gender Law and Justice, the Berkeley Journal of International Law, the International Law Society, and the Women of Color Collective. So we're so glad that we had so many demonstrations of support and that you're here with us today. So I want to introduce our panelists. We have two by Zoom and we have two in the room with us today. After the introductions, I'm going to introduce them in the order that they're going to speak. And please, those of you who are filling in, if you don't get a lunch, I'm going to be personally insulted. And then I encourage everyone to find a seat. There are still someone, there's one right here. There's one right there. There's seats. So then we're going to, each panelist will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to discussion. So first of all, on the big screen is Mehran. She is a human rights activist with over a decade of experience in international development, women, peace and security, and gender equality. She is now living in exile, where she advocates for the recognition of the systematic and institutionalized oppression of women under the Taliban as gender apartheid and its codification under international law. She currently acts as a policy advisor to the End Gender Justice Apartheid campaign and is the co-founder of the Afghan Accountability Collective and the founder of the Afghan Justice Archive. Through this work, she seeks to leverage international accountability mechanisms to hold the Taliban responsible for their violations of women's rights. In the room with us is Marwa Abubakar. She is a second-year Master of Public Policy candidate at the Goldman School, where she focuses on building systems that are more just, inclusive, and responsive to community needs. And she's with us to talk about her work in the Global Rights Innovation Lab Clinic, or GRIL, where she's been documenting public flogging in Afghanistan. As the daughter of Afghan refugees, she brings lived experience navigating institutions not built for historically underrepresented communities, which shapes her commitment to equity. She has experience in research evaluation and policy analysis with organizations including the International Refugee Assistance Project, or IRAP, which I know many of you are aware of or have been involved in. And her client is in GRIL, the Afghan Human Rights and Democracy Organization. And we're delighted also on the big screen to have Kazim Ehsan with us today from ARDO to talk about his work gathering testimonies from victims of flogging. Mr. Ehsan serves as a researcher and data analyst with ARDO. He has over 10 years of experience in media and human rights, including contributions to Afghan media outlets, translation and project management, with an emphasis on human rights, justice, memorialization, and democratic development. And last, but certainly not least, right here is Nushin Sakarati, who is the Deputy Director of Strategic Litigation Project at the Atlantic Council, where she develops accountability measures for abuses of human rights around the world. She was previously a senior staff attorney at the Center for Justice Accountability. I know many of you in the room are familiar with the group, where she represented victims and survivors of atrocities in U.S. and foreign courts. and she's also led the International Justice Program at Human Rights Watch. So this is a talent-packed panel, and without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Metra to get us started. Just remind you, yeah, and she knows, taking herself off mute. I've never quite mastered that after all these years. All right, Metra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I am very proud of the partnership we have with UC Berkeley's Global Rights Innovation Lab Clinic. I think it helps us a lot to translate a lot of atrocities happening in Afghanistan to a broader audience, and I am grateful for that. I will briefly start by giving some context on the status of women and girls in Afghanistan, and then briefly share our work, and hopefully it be useful for the students. And I'm really happy, and I wish I was there with my colleague Nushin, that we are in this process learning a lot from her on the legal aspects of it, and everyone else. So what's happening in Afghanistan today is unique and very distinct, because gender-based discrimination is legal and it's being enforced through Taliban's policies across the country. Since they took power, they have issued more than 200 decrees that they have issued many decrees, out of which 200 of them directly target women and girls and introduce controlling mechanisms, from right to education to employment, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, practicing culture, faith, and even religion is controlled. The voices and faces of women are criminalized in Afghanistan. So it has reached to that threshold of dehumanization. And I want to say it again, what's happening there is codified and formalized within the law of the Taliban, and it's systematic and institutionalized. So that's what makes case of Afghanistan very unique. And this operation and dehumanization of we are seeing in Afghanistan is not one discrimination or one ban or control against the right, but it's a totalizing system of operation, because everything that's happening there is about women is designed, and they're trying to socially engineer in a way that can maintain the dominance of a state in men over the women. That's one thing. And the second thing is a lot of these individual decrees that through Afghanistan's Justice Archive, I am monitoring and documenting the decrees the Taliban are issuing, studying and analyzing their legal and governance system. And we also, with the help of experts, trying to analyze how they violate international law and international obligations. What we see is, in addition to these decrees, they have law on the prevention of vice and promotion of vice and prevention of virtue, PVPV law. We are everything is formalized in one place and published in our national gazette. Lately, on early January, they published their penal code. It formalizes and legalizes gender persecution. The jurisdiction system call the main master and owner of the woman, and does not criminalize beating and domestic violence, as long as it says if the woman is beaten by the husband and man of the family, but if the bone is not broken and bruises is not open, then it's fine. So that you see that level of ill treatment and torture that has been formalized in Afghanistan. But also they introduced a caste system where they have the clergies at the top of it that enjoy full immunity within that penal code. After that, they call it ashraf, people of royalty, business people, and then they will receive only advice. Third class, they call it middle class, will be imprisoned. And then on that caste system, the last one is lower class, who will be imprisoned but also get physical punishment. So for the same crime. It legalizes and normalizes slavery too. So that's why what we are campaigning at the Gender Apartheid campaign is what's happening in Afghanistan should be recognized for what it is. It should be criminalized within international law. And we are pushing for codification of gender apartheid in the Crimes Against Humanity treaty, which Nushin John, I'm sure, will go to the legalities of it. The other thing is we also say why Taliban, the intention behind it is that's how their regime will be sustained, and that's how they are socially engineering the society. Yet they are, and if women violate any of these bans, for example, if women are walking without a man to go to groceries or to go to hospital, if she is not accompanied by a man, she is subject to imprisonment and torture. And the Vice and Virtue Morality Police is authorized that without any due process, just to stop and arbitrarily arrest her. But before I finish, I want to say one more thing is a lot of women who are resisting these discriminatory and draconian laws of the Taliban have been imprisoned and tortured and disappeared. But they also are introducing laws to put men out there to implement these laws. For example, if a woman is not dressed properly or she is walking alone on the street, then the man of the family will be subject to punishment from an hour up to 3 days, to which it also forces men to be part of enforcement of these draconian laws, but also their morality policies controlling women outside. It pushes men to control women inside. It directly authorizes men to be the justice system or the first person in the jurisdiction system. So that's why I think what's happening, atrocities we are seeing, needs recognition. And women of Afghanistan have been calling their experience as gender apartheid. And that should be criminalized under international law, and that's what we are trying to do. I'm happy to answer more questions later if you have any.
Great, thank you, Metra. We're gonna take questions at the end because these are intersecting conversations. So before I turn to Marwa to talk about the research that she and her team has been doing, I want Valentina Rosangel, who is the girls' data scientist, to give a data visualization of the decrees that Metra just identified. So when you hear Metra's description, and to understand what it means to have a totalized system of institutionalized separation and gender apartheid, it can be hard to get your mind wrapped around it. So one of the things that another team in the clinic has been doing with the Atlantic Council and Metra has been to try and analyze and visualize what this looks like. So this is a little demonstration of that visualization to see each of these boxes, and then you're going to see a timeline that's going to come across the bottom of when different sectors became shut down for employment for women.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's great to see a full room. This is a very difficult topic to work on, and we are very grateful to our client for sharing their data with us and letting us being part of their advocacy efforts. As Professor Fletcher was mentioning, we have been working on how to tell this story in a visual way. we have identified different human rights that are being violated for women, and the right to work is one of them. So what you're going to see is the timeline of the different sectors that have been impacted by the Taliban's return.
And we're going to get into this a little bit later, but this is sort of also a preview of Marwa's, is to understand that things work in fits and starts. It kind of feels maybe familiar to those of us living in this moment. It doesn't all happen at once. And we're seeing that in Afghanistan. And keeping track of that in real time is part of the work. Understanding it is part of all of our work. And then trying to resist is also part of our work. So this is part of deepening our understanding of that. This is one way we're doing it. And then, so keep some of this in mind. And I think Marwa's going to take us through another cut at the data. And we're going to look at gender apartheid through one specific kind of violation. And I probably should have given a trigger warning at this top of this. But we are going to be talking about public flogging of women in Afghanistan. And those of you, if you need to cover, we're not showing any visuals, but if this becomes difficult, obviously take care of yourself first. Your health is the most important thing.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Marwa Bakr. I am a Master of Public Policy candidate at the Goldman School, and I've had the honor of working with the Global Rights Innovation Lab as a data analyst with the ARDO team. So to start, as the daughter of Afghan refugees, sitting here today to present to you this research is both a profound privilege, but also a heavy responsibility. The data that we've been analyzing is harrowing, and I'm deeply grateful to Grill for this opportunity to work on a project of such importance to the Afghan people and to the international legal community. I want to recognize my teammates, some of which are in this room, Badla, Sida, and Nuri, who have been working on this project with us. Their rigorous analysis and dedication were essential to bringing these findings to light. Our team has sought to provide the empirical connective tissue between legal theory and the reality on the ground, using data provided by the Afghan Human Rights Democracy organization. So I'm here to present our analysis of corporal punishment, providing a data-driven look towards how the Taliban have been re-engineering the judiciary to enforce a system of systematic erasure. There we go. All right, so first, to understand these statistics, we have to look at how the data is captured. Our data set is built from the Taliban authorities' own public records. So specifically, there are formal announcements that are released through the Supreme Court's website and official social media channels like Twitter and WhatsApp. So on the slide, you're seeing a representative announcement from Parwan province in August 2025. It documents the application of the Taziyad punishment against 12 individuals, 2 of which are women. Notable here, as with the majority of our 524 observations, is the way that the judiciary groups these cases. So the announcement lists multiple defendants alongside a collective of charges such as illicit relations and theft, and then a range of punishments such as 30 to 39 lashes and imprisonment. So from a data perspective, this creates a significant attribution challenge because the Taliban often group men, women, and various charges into one single announcement. It's been difficult to individually attribute a specific ruling to a specific person. So this intentional lack of judiciary transparency really makes a gender disaggregated analysis difficult, and yet it also highlights the systemic nature of the punishment. The state is not interested in individual justice, but really the collective performance of morality through the whip. And so our data set is built from key recorded insights from these official announcements. From February of 2022 into the first week of January 2026, we have 524 verified total observations involving over 2,000 individuals. From 227 unique strings of raw charges, our team was able to identify 50 unique charges that we then consolidated into 17 categories. What's notable is that we have observations from all 34 of Afghanistan's provinces. And so the scale of the enforcement has been accelerating. In 2025 alone, we identified over 1,000 individuals charged, which is a massive jump from the previous years. While our data is limited to public announcements, this upward trend really suggests a deliberate expansion of this carceral state. The system is no longer stabilizing. It seems to be actively intensifying its use of corporal punishment as a method of social control. So this volume of charges really sets the stage for the specific types of crimes that are being targeted. So here we have the list of our 17 different categories that we were able to come up with based off the charges that we have in our data set. So the data shows a judiciary recentering on moral policing. Illicit intimacy, which is an umbrella category that is inclusive of charges like adultery, illegitimate affairs, also known as zina, is the most frequented charge with over 260 documented cases. Charges with categories of homosexuality, escaping from home, and public conduct, which includes improper wearing of the hijab or being outside of the home without a Mehran or male guardian, also have relatively high frequencies. And so this distribution is the quantitative basis for our gender apartheid argument. The law is being used specifically to target the movement and autonomy of individuals to enforce a rigid social hierarchy. And so it's a legal framework that is designed to criminalize existence outside of state-defined morality. And so our timeline reveals that this isn't random violence, it's policy-driven escalation. While corporal punishment was formally reinstated in late 2022, the true catalyst was the codification of the PV law, known as the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, in the third quarter of 2024. So following this, the frequency of the documented cases really surged, and it's remained sustained at nearly 70 entries per quarter. And so as a reminder, entries are not individuals, they're announcements. So within these entries, there's anywhere from one person to the highest recorded we have is 63 people in one given event. So we're witnessing a transition from a discretionary local violence to a unified state-mandated legal system. And so when we track these categories over time, the trend is pretty stark. Notice the green shading might be a little bit difficult from here, but they're representing the months of Ramadan. So that's where sentencing often pauses, interestingly, but it's followed by immediate surges. And since the PV law was codified, illicit intimacy, escaping from home, and homosexuality charges have remained consistently high. And finally, we're going to look at geography. So as expected, Kabul hosts the highest volume with 69 entries that we have recorded. But the raw volume really doesn't tell the whole story. Looking at Khost and Kandahar, both have 17 documented sentencings, but the sentencing rate over a population of 100,000 residents tells a different story. So Khost, which is a Haqqani stronghold, it still has the highest national sentencing rate at 3.8, which signals an aggressive enforcement style in this region. Conversely, Kandahar, which is the spiritual heartland of the Taliban's movement, has a rate of 0.9. So this suggests that in Kandahar, the system is so normalized that it may require less performance publicly of punishment to maintain control. So in total, of our 524 observations, we can paint a picture of a very pervasive and growing judicial system. But the numbers show the rates, they show the frequency, but they cannot show the impact. Behind the 260 charges of illicit intimacy, there are 260 human beings. So to understand the gravity of these numbers, we need to move from statistics to survivors. So we're really honored to have Kazim, Ehsan from the Afghan Human Rights and Democracy Organization with us to share direct testimonies from those that have survived the data I've presented. Kazim, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, and thank you, Global Rights Innovation Lab Clinic and Professor Fletcher for organizing this event. Back then when I just briefly shared a little bit of the context back then when I started collecting the data in 2022, I thought it's some sort of sporadic incidents that's happening. It first started in Faryab, then the whole province, then all over the provinces, but nonetheless it was not too often. Over there, it became some sort of daily practices. So before they were convicted, and they started that they publicly flogging and imprisoning people who are just accused. Though within their new law, they defined what's the accused, but nonetheless, the accused are the people who are not really, even by their own term, is not approved of or not proved to be guilty. But nonetheless, they were publicly flogged. There has been dramatic increase, an average of 70% increase, or 60 to 70% increase each year. And for example, in 2025, we had around 24, we had around 500 people publicly flogged. And in 2000, we have over 1,000 people. In 2025, we have over thousands of people publicly flogged. So it shows a dramatic increase. It's a way of actually Taliban governance. It become it's not only corporal punishment, it's all a way of enforcing the fair and the law and the way they rule the people. There are two major law and books that support this out of so many decrees, like Metra mentioned just. The law on the promotion of virtue and prevention of vice, or قانون أمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر, and criminal procedure code for procedure code for the courts, which enacted just approved and issued just a couple of months ago, and a book, The Islamic Imarat and System, by the Chief Justice. And behind all this corporal punishment is the Chief Justice himself, who finally approved that that certain case or certain people should be flogged or not, and he is make the decision on every cases, every single cases. With this, what I want to say that these numbers are really important, but they do not tell the stories. The whole stories. The whole story is not only corporal punishment, but what happened after the corporal punishment. Let me tell you a story from Herat province. In Herat province, there was a widow who husband died back during the Republic era, and then she had some children, and she had to marry to a shopkeeper, and secretly, because the shopkeeper was also married. So nonetheless, their marriage eventually came to the light when someone reported their relationship to the Taliban authorities. They were arrested, though the shopkeeper managed to escape punishment by bribing the official and ran to Iran. But the woman was tried and sentenced to tazir, or public punishment, and flogging and imprisonment. She was flogged and 18 months, and also imprisoned for 18 months. So she went through 39 flogging for adultery and disobedience of the Islamic law. After she was released, so this is how the story started. And when she came out of the prison, she had nowhere to go. It was not only a sense of, abandonment. She was not only abandoned, but those people who just abandoned it kept coming to kill her because they felt that she tainted their honor. So they taken away her children, and then for a couple of days around that, going to relative, to the families, to anyone, and she was beaten, she was harassed, and she was pushed away until to the point she couldn't stay in Herat province anymore, and she had to flee away to a neighboring city. In that city, she also has nowhere to go, so she has to with the body full of wound, full of torture in the prison. She is now surviving by begging in the streets, striving of dignity, family, and a home, and she has nowhere to go. And really, that's for many women in Afghanistan, the corporal punishment for a lot of them is not only it's a punishment, a physical punishment of or number of flogs or whips that she received. It's far more horrible. Or can you imagine that after that you have nowhere to go? Even the most closest people abandon you or even hunt you down to kill you too. And then you have to live as a beggar in the streets. This is the situation and how the numbers or the public flogging dehumanize, stripe the dignity of the people and the woman, and it's not a day, it's a daily, going through the day every day until you really die. That's how it is. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kazim, for that. I know that there will be more questions that people may have that we can get into about that.
Sure.
But thank you for collecting the testimonies. Thank you for sharing them with us. I now want to turn to Nushin, who's really at the center, in many ways, of then what do we do? Please don't ever lose your capacity for outreach. That is the only thing that's going to keep us navigating our way through the thicket of these kinds of horrors. And in navigating that way, we're here in a law school. Law provides the filament for us to then think about and imagine a way through. It's not the only way through. It's not sufficient, but I do think it is necessary. And Nushin has really been at the center of, on this particular issue, what can international law do, and what shape does that take? And so I want to turn it over to Nushin to talk about the legal efforts.
Thank you so much, Professor Fletcher, and you're really overstating my influence. I'm part of a collective group that's working on a campaign. We're part of the End Gender Apartheid campaign that's working on the codification of this crime. So my colleague Metra has described the work she's been doing as part of the Decrees project, where she's been documenting the decrees being issued since the Taliban takeover since 2021. And if you look at the progress of these decrees, as well as the impact and enforcement of those decrees that Marwa and Kazim have described, we're actually looking at the development of this institutionalized regime that's enforcing a systematic oppression based on gender. And this increasing oppression based on gender is now essentially preventing women, girls, and LGBTQI individuals from having any autonomy, any engagement in the public space. It's preventing equal access to education, healthcare, workforce, politics. It's essentially an imprisonment in the home. You might be surprised to hear that this is not a crime in and of itself. We were all surprised as well when we looked into this matter. So I'll give you a little background on where I work. I'm at the Strategic Litigation Project, which is an initiative within the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council is a massive think tank that works on a lot of different issues, but they formed a human rights initiative because they saw that a lot of these modes of accountability for atrocity crimes have various hurdles that still exist, and we need to see policy changes in order for us to see accountability for these crimes. So the work of my team is to identify pathways to accountability for some of the most serious violations of international law. What are the hurdles to see accountability, and how do we push for change to see greater access to justice for victims, like in the context of Afghanistan? Now, with Afghanistan, people have been calling the situation under the Taliban gender apartheid since the first Taliban regime in the 1990s. And this term has become really commonplace amongst advocates. But in 2021, when the regime took back control of Afghanistan, it started issuing these decrees slowly at first, but then increasingly, the term gender apartheid came to the fore again. At the same time, another movement was happening in Iran, the Woman Life Freedom protests over there, where the enforcement of the hijab was also being called gender apartheid. A lot of victims came to our team asking, what are the pathways to accountability? And we had to explain to them that the current definition of apartheid is limited to discrimination based on race. And it made sense that these groups were comparing Afghanistan to South Africa because the systematic nature of that domination that was being put into place was similar. The laws that were being passed to prevent equal access to education, politics, etc., and limiting one's autonomy, which was statewide, was similar in South Africa as it was to Afghanistan. And women's rights activists were shocked to hear that just because in Afghanistan it was based on their gender, it wouldn't be we couldn't prosecute this before the International Criminal Court the way we could if it was racial apartheid. So we saw a potential pathway to change this, which came through negotiations around a Crimes Against Humanity treaty. Is anyone familiar with the fact that there's a new international law treaty being negotiated? Okay. So just quick background on this. This has been in discussion for a very long time, but the Crimes Against Humanity treaty will be the first treaty since really the Rome Statute that will help define international crimes. We know that the situation in Afghanistan and the types of violations we're seeing around gender apartheid are human rights violations. But we're talking about the crimes. How do we see accountability against the state and the individuals who are perpetrating violence? And that's a much more narrow class. That is the things that are currently defined by the Rome Statute. It's defined in domestic courts through universal jurisdiction. And we're looking really at crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, crime of aggression. As a limiting factor. So under the Crimes Against Humanity, we do have the crime of apartheid, but it's defined as racial apartheid. So our team, when we saw that there was this new treaty being negotiated or in discussion and development, we made a legal brief to the advisors who are at the UN Sixth Committee. That's where the treaty is currently being debated. We asked that they insert gender as well as race to the definition of apartheid. And this brief that we submitted was supported by 100 different international jurists at the time, and these were some of the highest level international thinkers that we could present, including representatives from South Africa, who we saw as really keen to moving forward this definition of apartheid. Right now, there is a preparatory committee meeting on this draft convention for the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty. Metra is heavily involved in engaging these legal advisors to insert this definition. And what we once saw as a pipe dream in 2023 is actually gaining momentum. We now have support from 12 different states. We have a definition proposed by Malta, but we need more states to actually put forward the definition into the treaty. We have the support from the UN High Commissioner, various special rapporteurs to see the crime of gender apartheid codified. So this movement that Metra and Marwa and others are part of, which is identifying this violence and calling it a crime, is actually seeing some traction, which is really exciting. I think that's why Laurel asked me to come to sort of be somewhat inspirational in these dark times for all of you. But it's still a lot of work. This is just the first preparatory committee meeting that we're at, where some language around the definition can be inserted. We have another one next year. This is a long process. We won't see this treaty until sometime after 2028, 2029. But the work is necessary because we're seeing a recurrence of this violence. Now, some of you may ask, why do we need gender apartheid defined? We have the crime of other crimes like gender persecution. Well, it's really important that we crystallize and define unique crimes. Apartheid is different from persecution in that we're dealing with this institutionalized system. We're talking about an intent to maintain a regime that is widespread and systematic, just like persecution, but we're talking about an institutionalized system of discrimination, which is distinct from gender persecution, which just requires a fundamental deprivation of your rights under international law. And similar to some of the other crimes that have been defined over time, like sexual slavery, forced marriage, rape. These all could ostensibly be sexual violence. They are all sexual violence, but it was important to define them because we're dealing with different intents. We're dealing with different impacts, and the community wants to see those crimes well defined. Gender persecution is an incredible tool. We absolutely need gender persecution to move forward, and currently the ICC is investigating the crimes of gender persecution in the context of Afghanistan. But we still also need to call this by what it is, which is apartheid. It's a bigger system in place, and it has a separate intent than just the crime of gender persecution. If we are successful in codifying before the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, what's the difference? Well, the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, which will hopefully be ratified by many different states, will require all of these states to domesticate this law. Right now, not a lot of countries actually have the crime of apartheid in their domestic system. Once they sign on to the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, they will have to domesticate all of these crimes against humanity that mimic right now the Rome Statute definition, but will hopefully include some additional underlying acts like gender apartheid. So this will be in our domestic system, which is exciting because then we'll have hopefully universal jurisdiction to prevent, punish perpetrators who are traveling through our territories, or even individuals who may be in our territory that were carrying out these abuses. It's also important because then there could potentially be actions before the International Court of Justice, so a case against the state itself, which is really important. It's important to go after these individual perpetrators, which is what the ICC is looking at doing, but the state itself is responsible for carrying out this violence. And so being able to have a treaty like the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, which will include gender apartheid, will give us that opportunity to go against Afghanistan itself, states like Iran, for carrying out gender apartheid. So that's our goal at the moment. And the End Gender Apartheid campaign, you guys are welcome to look it up and follow along. They've been posting daily about the preparatory committee meetings and conversations that they're a part of. We have a really good Q&A that helps break down the definition and according to elements that we've been proposing. If you want to read our legal brief, it's so dense. I'm so sorry. I'm a horrible writer. I worked on this with too many lawyers. But our legal brief, which is really more for the legal audience, which you all are, was our first effort at putting forward a definition. It's evolved since then, but it sort of shows some of the historic examples of why we saw the need to codify this effort. But happy to answer any questions and, yeah, carry it forward. Back to you, Laurel.
Well, please join me in thanking all. Thank you. Can we get the speakers back on? Yeah, so we have a good 20 minutes for discussion. So while you're all going from passive reflection mode to burning question mode, I'll open it up with a question for folks. What keeps you, so we have two recent exilees from Afghanistan with us today. And you've both spoken in various ways about, I mean, this isn't an abstract problem. This is something that is happening in real time. What keeps you going? We've just seen through, the decrees are coming fast and furious. The new criminal code that the Taliban regime has enacted codifies even more extreme versions of earlier jurisprudence. And in other words, and the data, as Mara said, there's no end in sight. This appears to be intensifying and accelerating. We're not on the backside of this. So just some observations about, you're really in the thick of this. What are you drawing on in these times to keep you going?
Who should answer this question?
I would love to hear from each of you and also from Marwa if she would like. So, Kazim, since you unmuted yourself first, you have the privilege to go first.
Thank you so much. For me, certainly there are many reasons. I wrote it many times, and I'm going to say it again that though I'm living in the United States for a couple of years, but my mind has always been Afghanistan. And there's one reason that I really tried, but I couldn't give up at Afghanistan. Some sort of, probably their memory, their history, their part of me is there, without that part, I think I'm not complete, so I cannot give up on that one thing. Another reason is documentation and the working. Probably if you have worked in the first round of Taliban about the gender apartheid, if you documented every crime, every incident of public flogging or stoning in terms of a legal position, in many cases, probably today we were in a better position today. But there was no capacity, or there was no that sort of understanding back that, and there was no that enough documentation or whatever reason. And I think if we do not do today, we gave up a documentation, we gave up on recording every sort of that crimes. Tomorrow we are going to do the same cycle, and we are still on the same place without changing anything. So we don't know how many things going to change, when things going to change in the future. But this is the only thing we can do today, and I think we have to do today. It's our responsibility, both in terms of personal or social responsibility or whatever. But we have to do that. I have to do that, and that gives me a peace of mind, and that gives me a sense of doing my own share for bringing, at least for trying to bring accountability and justice to the country.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I don't even have thoughts about this question of why I am doing this. The situation is so bad. Girls are not going to school for the past 5 years. In the trajectory it sits on the life of women and girls, I'm not sure if they can ever be able to, this generation, go back from it. It has questioned, and I keep saying it has questioned the whole global human rights values and international mechanism and laws that as a global community we agreed on to say this is wrong. They are if we say take it as gender persecution, it's more than that. It's a totalizing system that a woman, only because she's a woman, cannot go to work, cannot have freedom of movement, cannot practice her religion. Her face is criminalized, and I think that's what that's wrong. And one of the things I keep saying it, and that's why I believe that accountability mechanisms is or the pathway that I am pushing forward is slavery was not something that we ban it as a global community for a single context. Now Taliban have normalized that. Torture is something that as a global community we decided that's wrong. The same with arbitrary arrest, the same with apartheid, the same with gender-based discrimination and persecution. So all of those things are being violated inside Afghanistan. And if we have the law, we should use that and I think ensure that the promise of law is delivered to the women and girls in Afghanistan. But at the emotional, I think, level is also it's about survival for women inside Afghanistan. And as someone who is in exile now, speaking with my family and friends inside Afghanistan, we don't have any option but to push for it. I don't have any option but to listen to what women of Afghanistan have been asking and demanding and fighting for. And also if a girl who hasn't been to school for the past 5 years keeping the hope, I don't have the right and I shouldn't have that privilege of being hopeless. So I think it's what I am doing is here is more, and that's what we say in campaign 2, is an echo of the demands and voices of women inside Afghanistan, and hopefully we'll be good messengers if we have the privilege to be in a safe country and able to fight within frameworks in international law and legal mechanisms.
Thank you. No.
Hi. Yeah, so I am the daughter of refugees from Afghanistan, and I have never been able to go to my homeland. This is not a unique experience. There are so many people potentially in this room that are from countries that have been torn apart by Western imperialism and all of the after effects. From a very young age, my family, but my mom in particular, instilled a sense of resilience and a pursuit of education that has been unmatched. And so it is a privilege to be here, to have succeeded in both my eyes and my mom's, but it means nothing. All of this privilege, all of this freedom, all of this education, if someone back home does not have it. I am constantly seeing videos of little girls where their only wishes are to go to school or to go outside and not wear a hijab or whatever it may be. And so I think my biggest goal in life has always been to be able to contribute to something that is bigger than me, particularly towards the people in my homeland. And so as heartbreaking as working on this project has been, opening my laptop every day and coding about public flogging in Afghanistan and looking at the number of victims, the number of women and girls that have been flogged for things that I do all the time. I walk around without a Mehran, without a hijab. I don't commit property crime, but anyways, I think it's been such an important experience for me, and it's really been the pinnacle of my work academically so far. So there really isn't a question as to why I do this. It's a need for me to be able to contribute to people back home and to a global effort against apartheid.
Thank you. And I think that as vital and important, the frontline directly impacted communities and those just outside of the danger zone to have that ability to organize and to act. I think it's also important to acknowledge that all of us here in the room, whatever our relationship to Afghanistan, have a role to play. Right? And that none of these struggles, these are all larger struggles than the individual, as Nushin reminded me of that. That it is about, so what is the role of allies? What are the roles of those outside? Each of us, regardless of our particular identities, by virtue of the fact that we are studying law, are training ourselves in a particular tool. Or for data science or technologists, we have particular tools that we can apply. And I think that we should not forget that this sits within this larger study. And as, I think Nushin, as you started to say, yes, this was about Iran and it was about Afghanistan, right? These are all interrelated struggles. And then when we think about reproductive freedom and reproductive justice in our own country, it is not a large leap of the imagination to see the continuities of institutionalized sidelining and evisceration of the public role of women in societies around the globe. But I wanted to give you a chance to either put this in larger context for the Atlantic Council work that you're doing, because this isn't your first legal campaign, and then we can open it up to some more questions. So now you guys have had plenty of time to think.
Thanks for aging me, Laurel. I'm still trying to pass for a student. No. Yeah, I mean, it was shocking as a practitioner when I was at CJA. our goal at CJA was to always see criminal cases move forward. And the reason, if you know the Center for Justice and Accountability, they primarily bring civil suits in the U.S. under Torture Victim Protection Act, and before it was under the Alien Tort Statute, on behalf of victims against perpetrators of some of the most serious violations of international law. And the communities would always ask, why is this a civil suit? Why isn't this a criminal case? This person tortured, this person, murdered, is responsible for war crimes, atrocities, but there are so many limiting factors in the criminal system, not only in the US, but worldwide. And so there was just so many justice gaps that we saw. So our director at the Strategic Litigation Project, she was a practitioner at the ICC, and she and I had always been in coordination because I focused more on universal jurisdiction, and she was always being invited to speak to these foreign policy actors about these impunity gaps. And she realized, we really do need a concerted effort. We need to bring practitioners together to talk about where are the gaps we're seeing in the law. And we were looking at things like the fact that a lot of countries that adopt universal jurisdiction don't have the type of liability framework, like they don't look at aiding and abetting liability or command responsibility, and that's how we can hold some of these actors responsible. But this Gender Apartheid campaign really came because Gisu and myself are also Iranian, and we, as Iranians, we also really see the situation of Afghanistan as our sisters. We share a lot of cultural similarities, language similarities, and our countries were oppressing women, Afghanistan to a much, much greater degree. So when the Women Life Freedom movement was happening and people were talking about gender apartheid, as we were explaining to them that there was a gap in the law, we started working with Metra because they had long known about this problem and had been long calling for codification. And before I joined the Atlantic Council, I was at Human Rights Watch. And when the Taliban took over, we weren't allowed to use the term gender apartheid. We couldn't support the women on the ground who were using this term because it wasn't defined anywhere. And we were limited to international law definitions in the Rome Statute. And so internally, I was working with my colleagues there to see, could we advocate for a definition like this is a clear gap in the law. And then luckily, when I joined the Atlantic Council, that's something I got to focus on. But we worked not just in the geographic context, we were also working with a team on a gender audit of this Crimes Against Humanity treaty. So we were working with other people who were trying to include things like sexual slavery and other types of gender-based violence because we saw this opportunity in the Crimes Against Humanity treaty to make it more gender inclusive, to meet the modern age. We didn't need to use the same laws that were established in 1998. We've evolved quite a lot to understand gender-based violence. So we unified with a lot of other groups who were looking at, forced marriage, et cetera, and including this in the Crimes Against Humanity treaty. And luckily, as a unit, we've really been able to make some advances in the discussions of the Crimes Against Humanity treaty. The biggest one is that they're talking about gender. They weren't really before, it wasn't a big issue. And now that is a very, very important discussion in these negotiations that are happening now.
All right. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for all your work and for this conversation. I just wanted to ask, I guess I was hoping you could explain the difference between the burden of proof for persecution versus apartheid and how that has impacted your strategy.
A great legal question for a great legal mind.
Well, there's a lot of similarities. We're still dealing with crimes against humanity. So we still have our chapeau elements of widespread or systematic violence against a civilian population. That's the same. We're still dealing with discrimination based on gender. So that's the same. But the distinction we're seeing here is this institutionalized system of oppression. So that is not in the definition of persecution. That is a bigger, separate thing. And we're also dealing with a separate intent element. We have the intent to maintain that system. So like the formal definition of racial apartheid right now is inhumane acts carried out in a system of Oh my God, you guys, I have to read it. It's so long. Inhumane acts that are carried out under an institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and discrimination of one racial group against any other racial group, and an intent to maintain that regime. That intent to maintain the regime, that institutionalized regime of systematic oppression, those elements are nowhere in persecution. It's nowhere anywhere else in the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty except in the apartheid definition. So that institutionalized regime is what we're looking at. It's persecution can be single incidents. And that's what we saw at the ICC. In the Mali cases, there were these single incidents of gender persecution. But what we're talking about, the system of Afghanistan, as Metra laid out, is this is system-wide. This is the regime itself is built upon a system of domination of one gender group against another. That's a separate element of proof that apartheid has. And even when the two crimes of racial apartheid and racial persecution were defined, the International Law Commission pointed out the distinction between the two. They said these are two crimes that can coexist, they can be mutually enforcing, but here, and we have a lot of underlying elements that are similar, but we have a different intent. We have an intent to maintain this regime of systematic oppression and domination. How that's going to play out, it's hard to say because there's never been apartheid litigation. You know, we unfortunately haven't had, South Africa had its Truth Commission. It didn't have the criminal trials that it should have. We are seeing apartheid being litigated right now at the International Court of Justice. South Africa has brought a case against Israel for genocide, but the ICJ has also issued some preliminary findings on calling the situation in Palestine as apartheid. So we're learning from that definition too of how we would really enforce the elements. We've put forward how we think we would meet the elements in the context of Afghanistan. In our briefs, but without seeing this played out in courts, that's still going to have to evolve.
Okay, we're now ready. So I'm going to take 3 questions and then let the speakers then answer. So. 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed learning about the treaty and all the successes that have come about with that in its development. And I was wondering, in terms of enforcement, to actually make a change in the lives of these women and girls in Afghanistan, what you are thinking that may look like.
You mentioned earlier that you've never been able to visit Afghanistan. Was the Islamic Republic, like whatever came before, was that also dangerous for women?
Hi, my question is about if you use the definition of apartheid instead of persecution, does that change who can actually be held accountable? Like, does it have to be a state actor? Can an individual be, held liable for an apartheid crime? And would that be a strategic decision?
Okay, so we have some empirical questions about safety, like what did the pre-Taliban regime look like and was it safe to travel there or not? We have questions about the efficacy of law. How is this actually going to make a difference? And I'm just going to, Nushin, you want to?
Yeah, my answer is quick. During the time that I've had potentially opportunity to go, the U.S. was invading and occupying Afghanistan. So it was less of a measure of safety, which was, kind of up in the air and trivial at many times, but more so just never had the chance, with my parents not feeling comfortable going back. But in recent times when I've had the dedication and motivation to, there's been an influx of laws that have been preventing me from being able to go and make the impact in the ways that I'd like to.
Mitra, I'd like to turn it to you about the impact in country. How would codification of gender apartheid or even seeing more cases through gender persecution affect the lives of people within Afghanistan right now?
Thank you. So I'm not sure if I got the first question. I think maybe I didn't hear it. In response to that, because I mainly do the movement building aspect and advocacy of that. I will touch on that, and then if any legal accountability that it brings, I missed, please, Nushin John, go ahead. So first and foremost is the nature of the atrocities Taliban are perpetrating against women and girls in Afghanistan is the totalizing oppression. And then the current existing frameworks, including gender persecution, I believe it does not, it cannot encompass the totality of those atrocities. So first and most, the accountability it brings is criminalize what's happening and name it, which I think would be first and foremost impact that we are looking forward to. The second one is it gives victims and survivors, mainly in our context, say women in Afghanistan, a clear legal avenue to hold perpetrators, if it's individuals or the regime of the Taliban, which is more important to us, because whatever they're doing, it's not an individual or group act, but it's the regime of the Taliban that is running the state of Afghanistan, that we can keep them accountable for their crimes. And the other thing that is more important to me is how a state part, it will create obligation for the state parties and also then allow us to ask them to criminalize it in their domestic laws and take steps to prevent, punish this crime, but also as a person in exile and as what women of Afghanistan are struggling is non-recognition of the Taliban. And I think it will also then bring that state responsibility or create obligations for other states to not normalize or recognize the perpetrator of gender apartheid if it's a crime, among, of course, other crimes against humanity, which now what we are experiencing these days is how, without any accountability, the states are engaging with the Taliban, regardless of the level of atrocities they're enforcing in the country. So I think that would give us a lot of other opportunities to go through different frameworks, hopefully through International Court of Justice, and then Nushin John can elaborate more on the universal jurisdiction aspect of it. That can, I think, would be powerful tools for us to do advocacy. That currently it's not that it's going to be the only framework or that it will play a magic in the accountability efforts that we are pushing forward, but it can encompass I think the context better, but also we see it as a more powerful framework that has also the capacity to create that I think global solidarity, and it can also develop a stigma and shame around it that would bring ethical and moral responsibility and obligation in addition to the legal one. But I think Nushin John is in a better place to go to the technicalities of that.
Mitra touched upon the issue exactly. So in the context of South Africa, the crime of apartheid wasn't criminalized until 1998. Before that, the definition was being developed, and the fact of calling it apartheid really did help create a global movement that, resulted in the toppling of that apartheid regime. But that took economic sanctions. It still took international advocacy, a global movement. Our goals with international law are to prevent and punish these crimes. preventing them. I don't know if the fact that we've codified these crimes really does prevent the crimes, but at least we can punish. It's important to document all of these violations and hope that there will be a future in which we can punish these individuals. The ICC, which has no limits on immunities really that we all face in our domestic systems, they can issue indictments against these sitting heads of state, which is quite exciting when they have these crimes before them and they can issue those indictments. It limits the ability of these perpetrators to travel. It limits their ability to do the political engagements and could eventually restrict their influence. And then with universal jurisdiction, when these regimes change, which they eventually do, or these officials lose their status, which they eventually do, we're ready. We're ready to bring the charges against them and see criminal cases. A lot of the cases I've worked on historically were dealing with violations from the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's important to create that precedent to show all of these individual actors who are committing these violations that one day, they'll never be safe. They'll never get to retire in Florida and have all the money that they stole from the state. So the goal is, future accountability, even if we can't deter right now what's happening. That still takes political movements. For Brittany's question, right now under the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, the idea is that there would be individual accountability and the opportunity to go after the state who's ratified the treaty as a whole. So there wouldn't really be a difference under the crime of apartheid or persecution in terms of being able to go after an individual and a state. But the ICC Rome Statute, which only has apartheid and doesn't have gender persecution, we can only go after individual perpetrators for persecution right now until we see the Rome Statute amended there.
All right, so please, thank you so much for spending this time to learn about this. For those of you who are already involved, thank you for your involvement. Wanted to thank the Grill students who are working on these projects, who are in the clinic. Any clinic, it's an opportunity to do justice work before you graduate. So please, we have little stickers. Remember us fondly. And we hope to see you at future events. And I think we have the room for a couple minutes. Would love to be in conversation. So thank you all.